the Ukrainian leadership has identified at least a couple hundred Chinese soldiers. They're embedded with the Russians. They're learning about drone warfare. They're learning about some of the changing technologies in war and trying to bring those lessons back to China to inform their political warfare and potential real warfare against Taiwan.
Hello and welcome to Independence Avenue Media. I'm Iameur Mishwili and we're talking to Matt Pottinger today. He was a Deputy National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term in office. And with that, Matt, thank you so much for finding the time to talk to us. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Now let's start with a big picture sort of question. Where do you think U.S.-China relations are at this point, and where do you think they are heading?
U.S.-China relations have been deteriorating over a period of more than a decade, and that's mainly due to the grand global ambitions of China's dictator, Xi Jinping. He joined with Vladimir Putin in a sort of proto-alliance, what they called a no limits pact. He has continued to wage information war, political warfare, economic warfare against the West writ large, and things have stabilized a bit under President Trump. But I don't think that they are going to get better. I think that Xi Jinping is continuing to back the Russian war in Ukraine. He is the decisive enabler of that war, to borrow a phrase that NATO adopted as an organization just a few years ago. He is the main backer of the theocracy, the Ayatollah's dictatorship in Iran. And of course, not only is he the main economic supporter of Iran by being the main buyer of illegal Iranian oil, money that does not go to the people of Iran, but goes to the regime, which just committed its own Tiananmen massacre earlier this month, killing, it sounds like perhaps tens of thousands of its own people who were protesting economic and political and cultural conditions in their country. Xi Jinping is the main backer of that regime as well. He was the primary backer of Maduro, the Venezuelan dictator, who is now going to face justice in a courtroom in the United States. So the structural problems in the relationship cannot be papered over by summits or warmer diplomacy like we're seeing right now between President Trump's administration and the government in China.
So what do you think is driving President Trump then when he's trying to pursue this diplomacy and try at least to make the relations better?
Well, I think he was stunned by Beijing's escalation dominance in the trade war. Beijing began cutting off the flow of rare earths elements and rare earths magnets, which in aggregate are not worth very much money, but they're extremely important to many things that are worth a lot of money, a lot of economic activity, a lot of products in IT and in military goods, as well as automobiles and aeronautics depend on those magnets. And so Beijing found a soft spot and successfully applied it. Now, I think that if President Trump had a full National Security Council staff, he would have been able to assemble his own leverage to back Beijing off from that move. But to date, I think that President Trump has chosen to take a step back from his trade war with Beijing. And he's doing other things that could put the U.S. in a more favorable position in the long term, including potentially helping bring about the end of the regime in Iran. If the Iranian people are, brave enough to go back out into the streets. Um, uh, I'm very hopeful that President Trump makes good on the promise that he's made several times now to be there for the Iranian people. So I hope that he enforces that red line.
Mm-hmm. Do you think China is approaching this with caution and care to see some of its allies, as you described, losing power? Is China reacting to that in any way, do you think?
Hmm. It's interesting, communists don't have real friends, right? They have fake friends. And Xi Jinping is running out of fake friends, both in at home in his domestic system within the party and also abroad. Remember, he was also someone who was supporting Bashar al-Assad, the Assad regime in Syria. Assad now lives in hiding in exile, somewhere in Moscow. Maduro was one of the so-called friends of Xi Jinping, and he's now in a jail cell in New York City. The Ayatollah is gunning down thousands of his own citizens to try to cling to power. If God is willing, we will see Xi Jinping lose that friend now soon. Now, and then what about his friends at home? The kid that he grew up with, who was a few years older than him and was sometimes referred to as Xi Jinping's older brother, was the top general of China. They grew up together. Their fathers served in the Communist Revolution together as comrades in arms. Xi Jinping appointed and elevated and sustained his so-called older brother in the top military slot, the number one general in China, until last week when Xi Jinping uh, purged him as part of the terror, Xi Jinping's terror that is gripping the senior ranks of the People's Liberation Army. And so suddenly his childhood friend and confidant, allegedly, because I don't think there are such things as friends between communists, this guy gets disappeared and he gets accused of high crimes, undermining Xi Jinping's authority. And so Xi Jinping is a lot like another Georgian, maybe the most famous Georgian until Georgia can put forward some wonderful people to replace the memory of Joseph Stalin. As so Xi Jinping is someone who really admires Joseph Stalin, who views Stalin as a role model. And Stalin, during his Great Terror in the 1930s, wiped out something like more than 80% of his generals. Xi Jinping has now wiped out more than 70% of his top generals. So I think he's trying to sort of overtake his philosophical mentor Joseph Stalin by wiping out his entire officer corps. So look, I think that we should be very wary of Xi Jinping and not underestimate him, but also realize he's running out of friends at home and abroad.
Mm-hmm. He still has one friend, that's Vladimir Putin. And he's helping Russia, as you said, and it's in Russia's war in Ukraine. How do you look at that friendship? Is it an alliance that the U.S. and the West should be concerned about, or is it some marriage of convenience at this point because China really needs to weaken the West through Russia?
Well, what may have started as a marriage of convenience has become now a marriage of necessity, because these two men, Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, have handcuffed themselves together. They may go down together or survive together, but they now need one another because they have gone into what for Russia in particular is a very unwise alliance. It is an unequal alliance. Russia is in the role of the junior partner, bleeding and dying on a battlefield, killing men, women, and children in Ukraine, and sacrificing hundreds of thousands of its own men. Uh, and for what? It's such a tragically misbegotten strategic blunder on the part of the Russian leader. But now he is more and more dependent on Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping is not sacrificing. As Xi Jinping is in the position that Joseph Stalin was in during the Korean War, when Joseph Stalin let Chinese boys and young men go fight and die against the United Nations forces led by the United States and in South Korea. And now it's reversed. Xi Jinping is like Joseph Stalin, sitting in the background watching Russian men die on the cold plains of eastern Ukraine, and Xi Jinping only acquires greater and greater leverage over Russia with time. Access to cheap, below-cost energy, uh, uh, and uh, and of course Chinese goods and services and technology and financing are what Russia's relying on just to keep its economy from capsizing. So that this is another one of those fake communist friendships, that I was talking about.
Do you think Beijing and especially President Xi's looking at what's happening in Ukraine? Do you think there are any lessons that he's drawing, especially as it relates to Taiwan?
Yeah. Yeah, so look, I mean, one of the lessons that was drawn early in the conflict when Putin invaded in February of 2022 was that war is a lot harder than it looks, or that people imagine it to be when they're drawing on their whiteboards. It is hard. The human factor, the factor of resolve, all of the unknowns, the brutality of weather, and basically it was a story of grave miscalculation on the part of Vladimir Putin. And so China, we see reflections of that in some of the early writing coming out of China. China was clearly shocked, like much of the world, that things went so badly for the Russian invasion. But since then, what we've seen is Beijing learning. They have limited numbers of soldiers on the ground. They're called mercenaries, but the Ukrainian leadership has identified at least a couple hundred Chinese soldiers. They're embedded with the Russians. They're learning about drone warfare. They're learning about some of the changing technologies in war, and trying to bring those lessons back to China to inform their political warfare and potential real warfare against Taiwan. So I worry about the fact, in a sense, that Xi Jinping has just gotten rid of all of his generals, or most of them, because some of those generals, including Zhang Youxia, his older brother, who's now in a dungeon somewhere, he was someone who actually had combat experience, unlike Xi Jinping. Unlike most of the Chinese military, usually generals who have combat experience are less, are a little bit more reluctant to commit to warfare, because they know that war is a lot harder than people think. So I do worry that with this younger generation of generals that Xi Jinping is rapidly promoting to replace the scores and scores of generals that he's purged, that we might end up with naive men who are gung ho about going to war, and that creates a significant risk of a crisis. Yeah.
Do you think the U.S. is doing enough to deter China from militarily acting against Taiwan?
So deterrence is has two major components. One is capability. If you want to deter, an adversary from attacking you or one of your allies, he has to know that you have the capability to actually back up your words. And the second component is resolve, will to fight. I think the U.S. is improving on the capability side. If you look at President Trump's defense strategy, a big part of it, one of the key pillars of that strategy, is ensuring that we get better and more efficient at our acquisition, research and acquisition of weapon systems, that we're able to produce munitions much faster. This is a long overdue set of reforms that I'm very hopeful is going to kick into gear fast enough to persuade Beijing that the United States has the ability not only to fight, as we already have, but to fight for a long time. Because if it doesn't look like we have the ability to fight for more than a few weeks, Xi Jinping might say all we have to do is gut it out, just like Vladimir Putin is trying to gut it out, for now years on the battlefield, almost 4 years on the battlefield in Ukraine. And by the way, we keep hearing headlines about how Ukraine is gradually losing territory and so forth. I am actually of the view that it may be that we're at this moment where it's darkest before dawn. I think that the Russians are in a meat grinder right now. They have lost more men in 2025, the year that just ended, than in any other year of this war. They were losing, according to the NATO Secretary General, more than 1,000 men per day in December. And they have not gained very much territory for all of that sacrifice. The Russian economy is a shambles, despite the propaganda that you read. So we just have to not lose heart. We have to be grateful for the sacrifice that the Ukrainian people, just the incredible bravery and resolve that they're showing every day to keep the entire free world safe. They are the tip of the spear for the free world. While many of us live in comfort, far away, the fact is that we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to the people of Ukraine, and Russia is not making the kind of gains that one would expect for the sacrifices that they're making. So I think that U.S. resolve is the second component of maintaining deterrence, and that's where I would like to see more. The president's national security strategy had a good section on Taiwan. I'm confident the national defense strategy, in its classified version, which I've never read, is quite clear. I'm reasonably confident it has a clear section on Taiwan, which is good. But it pays for the president of the United States to also signal resolve. Not to sound meek on the question of Taiwan.
How optimistic, pessimistic are you about a potentially big war coming up between U.S. and China?
Well, look, if deterrence holds, we should not have to fight. So that means signaling resolve in addition to continuing to spend more on our military, continuing to fix acquisition, to fix our defense industrial base as one of the pillars of the national security strategy calls for. President Trump the other day called for a roughly 50%, 50% increase in American defense spending. That is exactly the appropriate direction for the United States to move. That would put us back in line with where President Ronald Reagan was in the 1980s, spending on defense as a percentage of gross domestic product. So I'm very heartened by the fact that is a very good signal of resolve. I hope President Trump can work with Congress to make that a reality.
Thank you very much, Matt. I do appreciate your time and your thoughts today.
Yeah, thanks so much.